everybody. This is the Wednesday, December 8th, 2021 morning session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. Meetings available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGov PDX, www.portlandoregon.gov, and Channel 30. The public may provide written testimony to the council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to conduct the city's business. And with that, we will hear from our very able legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the meeting. Please be aware all council meetings are recorded. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. First up is communications. First individual, please, item 854.
Request of Pete Colt to address council regarding equity in inner Northwest Portland and government efficiencies. It doesn't look like Pete has joined us yet.
All right, very good. Next individual, 855, please.
Request of Amber Canavan to address council regarding support for banning the sale of fur products and foie gras.
Good morning.
Hello, thank you.
Morning.
My name is Amber Canavan. Thank the City Council for your time today. I'm a Portland resident and here today as a lobbyist on behalf of Compassionate PDX in support of a fur sale ban. I know you've been hearing from your constituents about this issue for some time, but let me remind everyone the issue that we're talking about. The fur industry is incredibly cruel and destructive to the environment. Most fur comes from fur farms where animals like mink and foxes are kept in factory farm conditions. These are still genetically wild animals who have large territories in the wild. Sorry about that. Usually keep to themselves in nature. But in cramped conditions of these fur factory farms, they'll often resort to cannibalism, self-mutilation. Mink are typically killed in gas chambers or by snapping their necks, while foxes and chinchillas are often killed by genital or anal electrocution. Their fur is then torn off and processed and sold as unnecessary fashion and luxury products. Fur production also harms the environment through water pollution runoff from these factory farms and from the use of heavy metals in the refining process for their pelts. There's an excellent documentary about the environmental impact of the fur industry called The Farm in My Backyard which I hope that all of the city council will take. I think it's about 4 minutes to watch. It's available for free online from a company called We Animals Media. Portland has always been a leader in progressive policymaking that sets an example for others in our state and beyond. But when it comes to animals, I feel that we are woefully behind. San Francisco, New York City, Chicago have all have horrible crime, homelessness, and other livability issues. Yet that didn't let them stop them from being leaders in animal rights legislation. The Portland for sales ban is based on language that has passed muster in cities across the country, and we have a version of it tailored just for Portland sitting and ready to go. I hope the City Council will listen to your constituents and finally take action on this long-standing issue. Please find time in the agenda to introduce a for sale ban in the coming new year, as well as potential for foie gras sale ban. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Keelan, did Pete show up yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, we'll go on to next individual, please, 856.
Request of Connie Schwendeman to address council regarding city policies, procedures, and protocols regarding street trees.
Good morning.
Richard, can you hear me?
Hello, I think I'm here now.
Okay, Connie, are you and Richard sharing a connection?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Connie Schwendeman, and I thank the mayor and commissioners for this time. I'm here today on behalf of property owners with street trees in Portland to ask you to reconsider your vote taken 3 years ago, making individual property owners with trees on city parking strips responsible for tree removals. This is a reversal of a long history of street tree removal service by the city and is another example of decreased services with increased taxation. We have 2 old trees that we've taken care of through ice storms, prunings, inoculations, and more recently, infrastructure repairs. A pruning of a large tree is a little more than $1,000 today, and pruning is a recurring event. This month, our dead elm tree is being removed at a cost to us of $13,750. It's been an expensive month to live in Portland. The trend is toward an unbundling of city services with no end in sight. We've arrived at a time when Portland's urban canopy has aged and trees are dying, and the city has left property owners with street trees with responsibility of paying the huge costs of tree removal. In addition, city policies don't give any incentive for people to want to plant new street trees, but this is a requirement. If you remodel your home, you have to plant a street tree or face additional fees, fines, and liens on your property. The city controls this easement. It just doesn't want any responsibility with it. There's no shortage of city personnel overseeing these policies. I couldn't find anywhere on the urban forestry website that says the property owners are responsible for planting, maintenance, and removal of street trees. Transparency apparently isn't part of their process. We all love our trees and their many benefits. However, trees are a big responsibility and can be a liability. They require tending, can disrupt power service, get into sewer lines, damage sidewalks, and other infrastructure. Proper maintenance to keep trees healthy comes at a cost. Urban forestry is suddenly interested now that our tree is dead. Issuing directives is what urban forestry means by working with citizens. The city doesn't classify its trees as capital, yet it likes to brag about its tree canopy of about 26% of Portland's land area and talks about the importance of trees to our city. If trees are truly valuable to the city, I respectfully remind the council that actions speak louder than words. Please support citizens who are now on the hook to pay for the removal of our city's aging tree canopy. This year, The city has a surplus of funds. Could a small portion be allocated to remove dead trees? Surely trees are a shared benefit and should be a shared responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. We appreciate your being here today. And I'm sorry that you've had to personally shoulder that much responsibility. It does warrant a look. So thank you for being here today to put this in front of the council.
Thank you.
Next individual, please, Keelan 857.
Request of Richard Peterson to address council regarding city policies, procedures, and protocols regarding street trees.
Hey, Richard.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Richard Peterson. I oppose the policies and procedures of the Portland Park and Recreation, the Urban Forestry Department, within the structure as it relates to maintenance removal of trees, street trees. I'll discuss 6 policies and procedures that are not in keeping with the city that works. Number 1 is lack of and poor communication. Why didn't the city of Portland send a written notification to property owners when the street tree policy was changed 3 years ago? Important changes in the city policy should be communicated in writing to those affected by the change. When elm trees, seed beetles invaded our area, we contacted the city with no reply. When we sent a letter this year, including sample beetles for scientific study, we received no acknowledgement or reply from the elm tree monitor team. Again, no follow-up, no follow-through. Communications with other than the 2 written notices that we have attached were strictly via email with no personal calls or visits. A simple phone call or a visit can prevent miscommunication and misunderstanding. Second point is the inspection permit fee. In our case, it was unusual because we reported the change in our trees' health to the city. We were immediately told that there was a $100 fee to pay in order for them to come look at the tree. Should we have to fill out a form and pay a $100 fee to do the city's job? Number 3 is written notice. The notice of violation received clearly made the homeowners at the tree site culpable of having caused or contributed to the death of the tree. Having been good stewards to our tree, we took this notice as adding insult to injury. The language is offensive and it is a lie. Deadlines, fees, subsequent enforcements were then enumerated. Number 4 is fairness. The concept of requiring the few to pay for the benefits shared by the all is oppressive. Why burden those with homes near trees with yet another responsibility? No accommodation has been made to help citizens with large old trees. Many homeowners have multiple trees, and many citizens just can't afford to pay the high cost of removing their trees. Where's the help for them? Number 5 is lack of a plan. There was no period of transition, no grandfather clause, no rebate, no property tax deductions, thus little incentive for those paying for the trees removal, maintenance, or planting. Transparency is number 6. When free trees are offered to citizens, we ask that the city be honest and let people know they're responsible for all the costs from then on, to include this in as well on your website. Since Portland often compares itself with other cities when processing fees and taxes, why not look at street tree policies in other cities like Milwaukee and Salem, who maintain their trees with taxpayers sharing the burden? This is about more than money. It's about responsible governing, fairness, and livability in the city. Let's be the city that works, not the city that shirks. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Keelan, somebody's unmuted, that if everybody's not talking, can mute it. It just helps given the large number of people that are on. Commissioner Hardesty, then Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask Richard what the policy was prior to 3 years ago. It's the way you and your partner have described it. It just went from what to now it's the homeowner's responsibility. I'm just curious. You know, Richard, are you on mute?
Mute that.
You just remuted yourself, Richard.
Right off. Okay.
Okay, here we are.
They took care of it.
The city took care of it. As far as removals and maintenance, they were involved with it.
See, I owned a house on 15th that had a tree on the street that was tearing up the sidewalk. And I was told, and that was my responsibility. So I don't know if it's ever been, it depends on where the tree is on the property. So I don't know if that's an accurate statement that the city took care of it.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
we certainly have replaced sidewalk. That has always, that's been a case for a long time. We had to work around the tree in order to do that. We had to raise the sidewalk and change the stairs going up to the house. So, but as far as tree removal, damaged tree repair, that was not our responsibility.
And that hasn't been my experience. I was just curious. I'll look it up myself, but I thought that something major must have happened 3 years ago. And as a former homeowner, I can just tell you that was not my experience. The city sent me a bill. You got to do this to the tree. You got to do this to the sidewalk, et cetera, and I had to do it. So, so thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. Commissioner Rubio.
Yes, first, I just want to thank Connie and Richard for the time that they took this morning to share their experiences. And I too will do some digging in and look at the history on this. From what I do know, urban forestry has been quite, as you know, Parks has been quite challenged with operating funds for many, many years. And so we are now in a position where urban forestry is getting ready to be more proactive on a lot of its tree policy implementation and other programs connected to that. So I will look to them and talk to them about what that means for this particular issue. But would love to follow up with you and have my staff connect with you offline once we do some digging and learn some information. So thanks again for coming forward.
Thank you. I hope we can resolve this. We have another 100-year-old tree that's on city property as well.
Thank you. Good conversation. Thank you all for being here today and
Thank you.
shining some light on this issue. Did Pete show up, Keelan?
No, not yet.
Okay, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
Oh, wait a minute, Mayor. We do have one more communication, 858.
Who? I'm sorry, which one?
858. They did cancel, but I probably should read the title.
Yeah, go ahead.
Request of Steph Avery to address council regarding proposed Fernhill Park and Cortland Public Schools Safe Rest Village. And this person did request that their communication be canceled. So.
Great, thank you. To the consent agenda, have any items been pulled?
Yes, 3 items have been pulled. Item 862, item 863, and item 866.
866. All right, we'll take those up at the end of the regular agenda. Please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan. Accept the City of Portland Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and corresponding audit for fiscal year ended June 30, 2021.
Colleagues, the annual comprehensive financial report comprises the actual audited financial results of the city's operations and provides information related to the city's overall financial health. The financial report is prepared by the Accounting Division of Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services. It's audited by the independent audit firm of Moss Adams, LLP. Today, we'll hear from City Controller Ron Vaught and Accounting Supervisor Ashley Tuttle about the fiscal year 2021 report preparation. We'll also learn about the results of the audit from audit partner Amanda McCleary Moore and senior manager Keith Simovic from Moss Adams. Then our Chief Financial Officer, Michelle Kirby, will provide an overview of the city's financial health. I'll now invite Ron Vaught and Ashley Tuttle to begin the presentation. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I think we have a slide deck. For the record, my name is Ron Vaught. I am the city's controller. Joining us today, as the mayor said, is Michelle Kirby, Chief Financial Officer, Director of the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services, and Ashley Tuttle, who is our accounting supervisor in the Accounting and Grants Management Division.
Hey, Ron, could you do us a favor before you start off, just for people who may not be entirely familiar with the important role that you play at the City of Portland? What does the controller do?
I'm the manager in charge of the Accounting and Grants Management Division. So you are probably really familiar with Sheila and the Grants Management team because you work a lot with them, and she reports to me. The accounting sections are financial reporting, which Ashley runs, systems and training, and then operations, which is the group that pays all the bills. We work with SAP quite a bit and interface with the EBS team there to take care of master data and postings and create everything that's needed by the bureaus to get the management accounting that they need to do the reporting that is necessary to track how we spend our money. It's really fascinating to me, but I think most people would probably go to sleep.
Not at all. And the reason I asked you is sometimes it doesn't get attention. The financial backbone of the city rarely does, unless something goes horribly wrong. And the fact that we haven't heard anything of late is always good news. But I see what you're doing as being critical, not only the financial operations of the city, it's also the core of our oversight and accountability mechanisms around the city's finances. So just wanted to give you a chance to highlight the important work you do, and thank you for being here today. And I'll let you go ahead and make your presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you. And like I said, it is fascinating work, and I think it's important work. But being the back office people, we kind of get ignored sometimes. Besides Michelle and Ashley, we also have Amanda Clary-Moore and Keith Simovic from Moss Adams. Amanda is our audit partner, and Keith was the manager in charge, and he was the one we mostly interfaced with through the course of the audit. Next slide, please. So today we are presenting to you the annual comprehensive financial report, also known as the ACFR, for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. We will be discussing highlights and financial trends from the ACFR and presenting you with additional information regarding the city's financial condition. Next slide, please. This is kind of getting into something that is probably only relevant to us, but really, I think it was a nice move that was made to try to be better citizens for the world. So in this past year, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board announced it is replacing the term comprehensive annual financial report with annual comprehensive financial report for both states and local governments. The change in terminology is in response to concerns raised by stakeholders that the common pronunciation of the acronym for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report sounds like a profoundly objectionable racial slur. Separately, a similar pronouncement also has a deeply controversial meaning in Arabic for those who practice Islam. This change in terminology is effective for this fiscal year So instead, the Government Finance Officer Association has recommended that we immediately implement this new name promulgated by GASB and Statement 98 and start using the term ACTFR rather than the previous acronym. This recommendation is a result of increasingly professional awareness that the old acronym, when pronounced aloud, sounds like the same as a derogatory term historically used in other parts of the world. Most concerningly, South Africa, where the term has ties to apartheid and is used as a racial slur towards Black South Africans. GFOA believes it is the responsibility of all governments, financial professionals to embrace change that moves us towards becoming more thoughtful, responsible, and inclusive global citizens. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Ashley Tuttle to tell you about the report.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and members of the City Council. For the record, my name is Ashley Tuttle. I'm the accounting supervisor for the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services. Copies of the annual report will be printed and delivered to each one of your offices in the following weeks. The preparation of the annual report is an extensive project which requires a group effort to make it a success. Involvement is needed from all city bureaus, the city auditor's office, and our independent auditors, Moss Adams, to ensure the timely and successful completion of the report. The accounting division of the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services is responsible for preparing their annual report, ensuring its accuracy, and working with the auditors throughout the process. Next slide. Now we will look at highlights from fiscal year 2021 annual report. First, I'd like to point out that the city continues to publish the annual report within 4 months of the fiscal year end. This ensures that the information is relevant and useful for decision making. The good news, as you will soon hear, is our external auditors, Moss Adams, gave the city an unmodified opinion and found no material weaknesses in the city's accounting processes. In addition, the annual report complies with state law and generally accepted accounting principles. We also received the Government Finance Officers Association Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 40th consecutive year. And now I will turn the presentation over to our external auditors, Moss Adams, for the report on the audit.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. And I think the slide deck up there, ours is included in there as well. So I think we can advance to the next slide and get to our presentation. I'm actually going to pass it over to Amanda McCleary-Moore from our side, the partner and engagement reviewer on this engagement. She's going to kick things off and then turn it over to me a little bit after that. So Amanda, do you want to take it?
Sure. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Ashley and Ron, for that introduction. For the record, I am Amanda McCleary-Moore. I'm a partner with Moss Adams that I work in the Oregon region, and I mostly work with cities and county governments. We go to the next slide. We have just a short agenda for today. So we're going to go through our engagement team. So who we worked with and who got to work with the city this year, as well as your number of other entities that we work with as well. The nature of the services we provided. So because you do have multiple entities, we do perform audits and various services for those different entities. And then I'll turn it over to Keith, and he's going to do a high-level audit process walkthrough, just kind of let you know what it's like to go through an audit of this size and working with the city. Because the past 2 years, the pandemic has impacted how we do audit. We'll walk through some of what we did there in our responses to COVID. And then we'll end with our conclusions. So we issue a number of audit reports that get bound with your financial statements and our opinions over certain areas. And then because our audit standards require that we provide you with some additional communications to how the audit went and just some highlights, we'll conclude with some of those required communications as well. Go to the next slide. So I have two slides on the engagement team. It's quite a significant team given the size of the city and the related entities. I mentioned I'm Amanda McCleary Moore. My responsibility is to make sure that we comply with all professional standards under the audit standards that we follow, make sure that we complete the audit on time. And at the end of the engagement, I personally sign all of the audit reports that get included in your financial statements. This last year, I took over for Jim Lancerata. So I actually did work on the engagement last year for your 2020 audit to become familiar with your team and familiar with your particular city. And then I took on that role this year, given his retirement at the end of 2020. Laurie Tisch is what we call the concurring reviewer. She performs an independent review. She's not part of the day-to-day audit team. So she gets to provide feedback on our audit reports, making sure that we didn't miss anything, looking through the financial statements. Usually by that point, there's not a lot of comments, but we do think that it's very important to have somebody that's independent from the team. Laurie is also the partner in charge of our government practices within Moss Adams. So it's nice to have her expertise review your financial statements as well. You met Keith Simovic. He's the senior manager. As Ron and Ashley mentioned, he's really in charge of the day-to-day. He's working with our audit team. He's working with management at the city to make sure that we really get all of the work done, that our staff are performing and getting what we need, and really having all of those communications with city management as well. Just a side note there, Keith will be enter our partnership on January 1st. So he will have that partner designation here in the next actually less than a month. Mandy Hale was the manager. She focused mostly on the city side of the financial statements. So she worked on that that new acronym, the ACT First, or your annual comprehensive financial report. So she really helped manage that team. If you go to the next slide, there's a few other members that I want to highlight. We do have a big team because of all of the different component units of the city. So Haley Gilfie is a manager that helped on the audit as well. She focused mainly on the single audit, so your federal awards audit. And then we have Daniel Hyman. She's the lead senior. She was in charge of the Prosper Portland audit and managing that team. And then we had Ed Solian. He's a senior in the Portland office as well, and he focused on the utilities side of the city. And then Amanda Peace was the lead senior auditor for the Portland Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Plan. So pretty big team. Of course, there was a number of staff involved. We also have our IT auditors involved, but this is really who led your audit engagements this year. Can you go to the next slide? So here's the nature of the services that we provided to the city. So we're engaged to issue an independent audit report over the city's governmental wide financial statements, as well as the fund financial statements. That means we issue opinions. We don't just issue one opinion. We do look at the different opinion units of the city. So we will audit your major funds that are presented in your balance sheet and your statement of net position, as well as your business type activities and governmental activities that are reported in the financial statements. We also provide assistance in technical review of the financial statements, or that ACFR, for compliance, not only with GAAP. So you're required to follow the generally accepted accounting principles. You follow the GASB standards, and that in order to obtain that unmodified opinion, you have to follow those standards. However, in addition to those standards, you are also providing some additional information to the users of your financial statements and have some additional required elements to obtain the GFOA Certificate of Excellence. So those are those additional supplemental schedules, statistical information in the back, as well as some introductory information at the beginning of your financial statements. So some additional requirements. I do participate in that GFOA review program, and so we're able to review those statements and make sure that you're meeting those additional requirements. Because you do have federal awards that exceed $750,000, which obviously you receive well over that threshold. We do complete our audit in accordance with the governmental auditing standards as well. Those standards require that we have additional CPE and have adhere to a higher level of independence with respect to the city. Additionally, we will issue a report under the governmental auditing standards that talks about internal control over financial reporting. Because you're an Oregon municipality, the state of Oregon has put out requirements for auditors auditing governments to perform some additional procedures. So we do perform audits of the compliance with some Oregon revised statutes and issue a separate report on compliance with those items. Then we have, because of the federal awards, we issue a report under the uniform guidance. We do complete the audit separate from the city's financial statements. We perform it right after, so it does come in a separate reporting package. And in the current year, we audited the Coronavirus Relief Fund, as well as, what was the other one? The Emergency Solutions Grant Program. So those are the two programs that we audited in the current year to get that coverage to meet those standards. And then lastly, our last service is this communication to those charged with governance. So that's what we're here to do today, to report to you all. And we have some additional communications to report. And with that, you can go to the next slide. So we mentioned you have a number of entities that we audit as part of the city audit. So we talked about the city of Portland. So we perform an audit over the financial statements, which is that ACFR acronym right there, as well as the single audit. For Prosper Portland, we audit the ACFR, and the single audit of Prosper Portland is actually combined with the city of Portland's audit. So we audit that as one engagement. Then the Portland Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Pension Plan, it also requires an audit. So we audit those financial statements, as well as the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission. We audit those financial statements as well. So kind of just a snapshot of the engagements that we audited as part of our project this year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he's going to walk you through that kind of high level. What does an audit look like? What did we do while we were there?
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. And we can go ahead and advance to the next slide here. So just to give you a little more insight into this audit process, there's a number of ways that we can test the items included in that financial statement to get to this point where we're providing audit opinions on those financial statements over the fairness and accuracy of those. So there's really three ways that we employ to do our testing and to follow our professional standards. One is we take a look at internal controls. It's very, very important to understand how transactions are processed and what are the reviews along the way in a number of different areas that impact your financial statements. And you'll see those listed out in the bullet points here. And we always highlight IT is a big piece of that and grows in importance each and every year in the audit profession because so many internal controls are done in an electronic environment. So we need to understand what are the internal controls there to understand who has access to the system? What can they do with that access? Is it removed timely when someone's terminated from the city? Is it updated appropriately when someone changes roles? So those are very, very important. In addition to those manual controls, the reviews, the approvals, and things like that in these different areas that we list here. Analytical procedures are another important area. We spend a lot of time mainly with the reviews or the revenues and the expenses that are running through the city to understand where those items ended up and does that meet with our expectations based on maybe the budgeted expenditures and revenues for the year, maybe based on previous years and trends that we're seeing over the last several years. So there's a number of different ways that we can look at that, but it gives us kind of a 30,000-foot view to say, hey, does anything look off from our expectations? And we can dig down in from there to see if there's any issues with how things are recorded. Where we spend the bulk of our procedures is probably going to be in that last item, which is the substantive procedures. This is where we're pulling detailed samples, where we're going back and looking at contracts, agreements, invoices, that supporting substantial evidence, that audit evidence to say, were those transactions recorded in the right period at the right amount? Do they have an appropriate business purpose? Or were they classified in the correct account as well? So all those are very, very important and where we spend the bulk of our time in this process. So we can go to the next slide. That gives you a little more insight into that process, but we do want to touch on just briefly the fact that we did this audit in a remote environment for the second year in a row, and just kind of a reminder of how we do that, because prior to these last couple of years during COVID, all of this was done each and every year on site, and we would bring our teams on site and we would be pulling documentation and reviewing through it on site, having those conversations with staff while on site. So this was all done in a remote environment, and thank goodness for technology and the different ways that we're able to employ that. All of the information that we exchanged with staff was done through our secure file transfer portal. So very safely and securely able to transfer digital documents back and forth to do our testing. We also, of course, employed the use of tools like this, like Zoom and WebEx and different things to have our meetings and have those interviews face-to-face, but also very important for screen sharing capabilities. Like when we would do our internal control walkthroughs, we be there on site in the past, be able to look over someone's shoulder as they process a transaction and see the internal controls, the checks and balances along the way. With this technology, we're still able to do that. We can have them use screen sharing and we can see exactly what's going on screen while we're doing that. So we definitely use that and test those internal controls throughout the year to see, are those being applied consistently, even this remote environment, because that definitely throws a wrinkle in the ability to transact business. And then also, as we're reviewing that financial statement document, it's very important to be transparent with the disclosures and the impact of COVID financially on the city currently, and the uncertainties going forward related to COVID. So that's something we take a good hard look at what is being disclosed in those financial statements, and do we believe that's presenting a transparent picture of the city for now and outlook on the future as well. Go ahead and move forward to the next slide. So this is the good news. Amanda teed it up with the different reports that we issue, but I get to pass along the very, very good news here. And I think actually maybe it was Mayor Wheeler at the beginning of this saying, you know, this is an area that is very important. It doesn't catch a lot of attention unless something goes wrong. I completely agree with that. And this is exactly what you want to see. Yes, it's not going to catch headlines or anything like that, but it is very important and speaks to the hard work that your staff put into this, and the good policies that are put in place and the internal controls that are followed throughout the year to get to this point where you can put forth a very robust and accurate financial statement document where you're able to get a unmodified or what's known as a clean audit opinion on those financial statements, saying that through all the testing we did, we believe those are prepared fairly and accurately. The additional reports that we issued, the government auditing standards report, we didn't have any findings there, so no significant issues with the internal controls that we looked at that we had to note in that report. So very good news on that piece. And same with the Oregon minimum audit standards report, those additional compliance requirements that I mentioned, we didn't have any findings, compliance findings as we went through our testing, where I'd say the bulk of our time is spent on testing procurement, public procurements, as well as your budgeting process and following local budget law. So those are two areas that we spend a lot of time on, in addition to a few others, but we did not have any compliance findings there. And same with the federal funding, the single audit, those grant programs that we look at, making sure that you're following the law of the land in terms of the compliance requirements with those grant programs. We did not have any findings. So this is as clean as it can get across the board with our audit testing. So very, very good news there, and speaks to the quality of the team and the policies that you have in place. Go ahead and move forward to the next slide. This is just giving a few highlights of the additional communication that we issue as part of every audit that we do, called the communication to those charged with governance, just highlighting some additional things as to how the audit went. We've got bullet points on here on the different paragraphs. I'm not going to go through each of those, as most of it is fairly boilerplate language that our professional standards require, and we didn't have to modify it for any issues that came up when you see some of these things that talk about disagreements with management or difficulties in performing the audit. Those things didn't happen, but we also want to identify and bring up a couple of the items that are in bold here. One, were there any audit adjustments in the process? And of course, as you can see, there weren't any material audit adjustments, but just to clarify, those would be anything as we're going through our audit testing that would be considered an error in how something's recorded. So as we're looking at those invoices, those contracts and agreements, did we find anything where something wasn't recorded at the correct amount or in the correct period, or that didn't have an appropriate business purpose? Those are the types of things that we're looking for in our testing once we start diving in, and we didn't have any material audit adjustments in the current year. So very good news, and that's exactly what you'd expect to receive with the internal controls and the processes and team you have in place. And the last bullet point there, this is also a letter where we would note if we had any significant recommendations, which we kind of classify as material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. That's the highest level of severity that we could note with a internal control deficiency. So a lack of checks and balances that could result in a material error. We didn't have anything that fell under those circumstances. So very good news there. Again, that's exactly what you're looking for. We always do have some best practice recommendations that we bring up each and every year as a result of our process, and we share those with the team. But we didn't have anything to that high level of severity, those red flags that you'd want to be on the lookout for. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. And I think that's it for our prepared comments here. Of course, just a big thanks to everyone that was involved with this process. Of course, the finance folks are listed on here, and the auditor's office and their involvement in this as well, as they are the ones that contract with us as your audit firm. But everyone that we work with, from the IT perspective, from a payroll perspective, HR, project management at the various utility funds. There's a lot of different moving pieces to this audit, a lot of different folks that we talk to, and everyone's been very helpful along the way, even in this remote environment. So really appreciate that. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to your Chief Financial Officer, Michelle Kirby, to take it through the next portion of the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith and Amanda, for joining us here today. And congratulations, Keith. I didn't know you had a promotion coming. That's great news to hear. We could go to the next slide now. And for the record, I am Michelle Kirby, the City Chief Financial Officer. And as you all are very well aware, it's been a tumultuous and trying year in ways we could not have imagined. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought severe and prolonged public health, economic, and social impacts to our community members, organizations, and businesses. It has also exposed and exacerbated financial and social inequities which existed prior to the public health crisis. The most notable challenge at this time is the continued uncertainty paired with increased service level demands due to the prolonged impacts of the pandemic and the economic recovery in the Portland metro region. While the city has received significant federal resources, these resources are one-time in nature, and the duration and severity of the service level needs for the vulnerable community members and the overall local economy remain uncertain. As leaders, I know you are very interested in the health of our city finances and how we compare to other cities in terms of our financial condition. We can go to the next slide, please. I want to assure you that we are doing very well. The good news is that the city's general obligation debt remains rated AAA by Moody's Investor Services. We've held a AAA credit rating since 1976, which was affirmed this past February, as you see on this slide. And as a reminder, less than 10% of government municipalities have AAA credit ratings, which is the highest rating and which Portland has held for many years and which we've maintained during this tumultuous time. This is important in that it allows us to borrow at a lower interest rate, which has saved us literally millions of dollars in interest cost over the years. So you might be asking yourself, how have we managed to maintain a strong financial position throughout this challenging time? And the answer is that it takes good assumptions, strong policies and mechanisms such as contingencies that allow us flexibility to stay on track. And as the Moody's credit analysis report noted, our demonstrated fiscal controls will drive stable financial performance. The next slide, please. It is said that a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, financial ratios also paint a picture, and it's the picture of an entity's financial condition. To obtain a financial ratio, numerical values are taken from the annual financial statements, and the resulting calculation is used in financial trend analysis and can also be compared against other companies, or in our case, against other governments. Today, we're going to look at 4 key financial ratios, 2 that demonstrate our liquidity and 2 that present information about our debt and pension liabilities. And we're also going to examine how those ratios for our city compared to other cities across the country. Next slide, please. Okay, so our first financial indicator examines our general fund balance as a percentage of revenue, which is measured by Moody's in their credit analysis. And this is also a GFOA recommended best practice that all governments maintain an adequate level of general fund balance dependent on their unique circumstances. This is a measure of liquidity. Liquidity is important in that it helps us to be flexible and mitigate risks. So ideally, we want this indicator to be high. But let's look at what the slide tells us. Across the top half, you see on the left side the purple bar, which is Portland, our ratio taken from our financial statements. Compared to first other AAA cities, we're going left to right. We're looking at other AAA cities, then other 2A1 cities, which is 1 notch down, and then AA2 cities. And I want to point out that this is as of 2020, because that is the information that we have on the other cities. So I'm sure you've noticed here that we are at approximately 15%, which is lower than the other cities we see. And I indicated earlier that the level of adequacy is determined based on individual circumstances. So in our case, the stability of our revenue stream is an offsetting factor that allows us to carry a more modest fund balance than our peers. So in other words, property taxes and business license taxes, which are 2 of our major general fund revenue streams, are more stable than, say, sales tax, for example. Across the bottom, we see the Portland trend analysis from 2016 through 2021. And we included 21 on the far right because we have that information. That's what we're reporting to you today, is our annual financial statements for 2021. And this helps us to demonstrate that getting this report out early is helpful in that it gives us this information to track and to present to you. And you'll notice that the 2021 light purple bar has a significant jump in fund balance. And this is due to the proactive cost-cutting measures we took at the start of the pandemic and the better than expected performance of our business license tax revenues during this past year. So this is the first time we've presented financial ratio information to you. And I see, I'm having a hard time seeing, I see Commissioner Maps has his hand up.
Thank you. I'm still learning about this indicator, and I have a couple questions about it. I thought I heard you say that cities with higher credit ratings should have a greater available fund balance. On the other hand, when I look at the top, so why is it with the top slide, we see that the cities with the lower credit ratings tend to have higher fund balances than the AAAs?
So there are numerous indicators that credit rating agencies look at. we're looking at 4 today out of, I think, 35.
Okay.
They also look at the economy in the region. They look at your controls. So the lower rated cities possibly had to have a higher fund balance due to the nature of their economy. If you're in an area that's hit by storms regularly, maybe you have to be more flexible and have a larger balance on hand, for instance. And then I also indicated that Portland has stable revenue streams. Cities that have sales tax as their primary revenue really need larger fund balance because that revenue stream is so volatile. It changes quickly up and down. And so you need more flexibility than our revenue stream requires.
Okay. So you said there are about 35 different indicators that we could look at, and we're looking at 4 today. Why did you pick this one to show us?
So the 4 we chose were key indicators, and they're ones that in the Moody's report, in their analysis, they flag or they comment on that are factors that helped them make their decision.
Okay.
They're the primary or key factors that they present as their rationale for our credit rating.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'd be happy to bore you someday with more of them if that's requested.
I would probably like that, but I won't make you do it today.
Okay, good. But we do have 3 more. So why don't we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. This one is also liquidity, and the format is the same as the previous slide. The format will remain the same throughout all 4. And this is also a measure of liquidity. However, it presents the results of our operating cash balance as a percentage of operating revenues. This is for all governmental operating funds. However, that would not include our utility funds. So I just want to be clear there. And you can see we've been able to maintain a strong cash balance over many years, which is a favorable attribute. And the increases that you see on the bottom row in fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 are reflective primarily of our receipt of one-time federal resources. This one is pretty cut and dry, but so if there's no questions, I'll move on to the next one. So our next slide, thank you.
There's a question from Commissioner Ryan.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yes, Director Kirby, going back to the cash metrics, I've had a couple experiences in my life where on paper, the organization looked better than it was in cash. And so I just have the saying cash is king. So is this a factor that they look at that really helps this AAA rating? I'm hoping that they factor this one in at a high percentage.
Oh, yes. These are all indicators that Moody's looks at. In fact, the other cities we got from their database. So Moody's is tracking this. It's one of the numerous factors that they look at in providing us our credit rating.
And did you say that, I don't know if I heard this right, did you say that the federal investments that came through Rescue and now ARPA was one reason why we saw an uptick in 2020 and then in 2021?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
This is my first go around on this particular report, so I'm still figuring it out. I'm not sure can you give me an intuitive definition of what operating cash as a percentage of operating revenues is? I know we don't have the utility dollars there. If you were to put this into terms that a civilian can understand, what am I looking at here?
Okay, so the cash balances that we have in the bank and report on our financial statements for instance, the general fund, I believe the transportation operating fund, the grant fund. Those funds are on the governmental side of our general ledger. Our enterprise funds, such as water and sewer, stand on their own because of the nature of the way they were created and how their finances are managed. So they're self-supporting. So these governmental funds are important because they're important to investors because there's more flexibility around them on how they're used, and having cash balances in your operating funds to allow for flexibility just is important. It's part of that liquidity factor. Did that answer your question?
Is this like a point in time?
Yes.
I would imagine that our cash, so what point in time, maybe that would help. What point in time are we talking about?
So all of this information is as of fiscal year end. We took the, we're presenting to you the financial report, the annual financial report, which is as of June 30th, the current one, June 30th, 2021. So that 2021 bar, you see the light purple on the bottom, those numbers came from the report we were talking about over the last half hour.
Okay, thank you.
And so it's definitely a point in time, yes. It does go up and down. Okay, anybody else? The next one is even more exciting. This is now shifting from liquidity to liabilities, or what we owe. And this ratio is reflective of our debt burden. In other words, we're showing our governmental debt as a percentage of real market value. And with liabilities, it's more favorable for our Portland purple bar to be low, which demonstrates that we have the ability to repay the debt and that the interest costs have not overtaken our budget flexibility and your ability, therefore, to fund priority programs. And while it appears we have room to finance some additional capital projects and still stay in line with our peers and under our debt policy limits, it's important to note that the repayment would need to come from a voter-approved tax increase or would need to be budgeted with ongoing general fund resources. And I have our debt manager, Matt Garrick, here to answer any detailed questions you might have on this topic, because it is a tricky one.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people, Commissioner Maps, then Commissioner Hardesty.
Sure. Thank you. First, could someone define for me what real market value means in this context? And then my second question is going to the top graph. If we compare how much debt the city of Portland has taken on and look at how, and compare that to other AAA cities. So we have our government debt is about 0.6% of whatever real market value is. It seems like other AAA cities are more like 1.9. If we were to translate that gap into dollars for Portland in particular, like what does that gap equal in terms of dollars? But why don't we start with real market value so I have a sense of that, and then if someone can give me a ballpark guess on the gap between Portland's debt load and the AAA debt load, that'd be great.
All right, Matt, I am turning this over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Commissioner Nash, for the question. So the real market value question, that's what the county assessor looks at all the property within the city. And that's what the real market value of what they think that property is worth within the city. And then the second question, if we're looking at the ratio and converting it into dollar figures, it would be like, in order to get to the 0.9% of ratio, that's equivalent to about $500 million.
Okay, thank you.
And then Commissioner
So
Hardison.
this doesn't, just to clarify one other thing too, this doesn't include some of the authorized but unissued debt that the city has. So there is some debt that this council has authorized, but we have not issued yet. So there's a little bit of, if you were going to include that, we'd be a little bit worse than what's shown here.
And I think you may have just answered my question, because my question was the city's liability as it's reflected on this chart does not show the full picture of the city's liability. Is that accurate?
Liability in terms of, can you clarify that?
Well, I mean, I think we're talking about this is repayment of bonds for capital projects and other things. The city has debt that's outside of, or the city should incur debt outside of that process. I'm talking in reference to the maintenance backlogs that we have at the city of Portland. So if we were going to go out to bond for all that back maintenance needs, then we would look significantly different, is what I'm saying. I don't want to paint a false picture that somehow because the debt that we already are in is not based on what the need is, right? The difference between the need and what we've already bonded for is significantly different. Is that an accurate statement?
I'm sorry, I'm on mute.
I think all of this debt is capital projects that were already approved over the years, and it's also important to note that this is governmental debt. This does not include the utility revenue debt.
I'm still just talking about governmental.
Right. So there is certainly need far beyond what we have already. There's need that we haven't financed yet.
That we're not, right. That's the point I'm trying to make. Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that this is just a snapshot of debt that we've already incurred, not debt that we need to incur in the future.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep it moving, Michelle. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So our fourth and final ratio reflects what we owe for pensions. Both our Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Benefit Plan, FPD&R, I'm going to refer to it as FPD&R, which you see as the gray portion of the top left bar, as well as our Oregon Public Employee Retirement System, or PERS, which covers the majority of our city employees. Our pension liability in total appears very high. You can see that the outstanding liability for the FPD&R plan is what makes up most of this total outstanding pension liability. And that's because of the pay-go funding approach of the FPD&R plan, which is considered low risk, however, due to our dedicated property tax levy. So let me explain that a little bit. The annual FPD&R plan benefits and expenses are paid with revenues derived from a voter-approved dedicated property tax levy, which can be levied each year up to an amount no greater than $2.80 per $1,000 of taxable real market value. Our current levy is at $1.15 per $1,000 taxable real market value, which is quite a bit under. So this dedicated property tax levy has been sufficient in all years to meet the required annual benefit payments, and its adequacy to make future payments is tested regularly, which is why this liability is considered fairly low risk. Our PERS plan is a multi-employer defined benefit plan, which is funded via monthly employer contributions at an actuarially determined rate. The funded status of the plan is primarily a factor of the rate of return on plan assets. The good news for this year is that the plan has seen strong investment performance, and of the latest data available, the plan has earned 17.3% through October. So, do we have any questions on this slide? The item that frequently needs to be discussed, which we discuss with the rating agencies and others who, it looks on paper that, we have this huge liability, but because of the offsetting levy for the FPD&R plan, it actually brings our risk down to a more manageable level. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Commissioner Ryan has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time.
I just did it. Your explanation made me want to just know a little bit more. So I followed what you were saying, that the FPDR has a revenue stream, if you will, that comes in to support that. So therefore this isn't an alarming. And I appreciate that you broke it down between PERS then and that. I wish going forward that, say in the data below, maybe the proportionality is exactly the same, Director Kirby, but I like that you did that with that bar graph. I think it's smart going forward to always give us that breakdown now that we have this information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
And doesn't PERS have its own, it's pretty volatile as well at times, right? That was my experience when I was at the school board. There were years, obviously 2008 was a rough one for PERS accounts and such. So it's so connected to Wall Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's connected to the rate of return that the rate of return the assets can generate. We put in our monthly contributions, and those assets are in a big pool that is invested, and it's dependent on the market rate.
Yeah. So I guess just going forward, that would be the one that I want to make sure I can track easily and
sure,
and follow. Like, I don't know, maybe from 2016 these ratios were fairly much the same, but just going forward so we can see if there is volatile changes in that. Yeah.
Yes, I'll be happy to modify this slide.
Thanks so much.
Going forward. Okay, we can go to the next slide, which is our conclusion. Throughout the past year, the city has successfully managed significant shifts in resources and operations while minimizing impacts to services and community members by being thoughtful, flexible, and adaptive to this changing environment. Despite extreme adversity, the city has come together as a team to address each challenge. Financial excellence takes effort. The city's strong credit ratings reflect our efforts via our demonstrated fiscal controls. And it's the combination of strong financial policies, disciplined budget management, and long-term sustainability monitoring, which provides the foundation to meet unprecedented challenges when they arise. So these characteristics will continue to serve us well as we continue to navigate and manage through the pandemic and its fiscal impacts. And that's our presentation for today. So Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. And colleagues, those are great questions. Thank you very much for asking them. If there's no further questions, Keelan, do we have public testimony on this report?
No one signed up, Mayor.
No one signed up for testimony on this report. Very good. Any further, Commissioner Ryan?
Yeah, one further question, Director Kirby. It seems as though we're in a season of unprecedented federal investments, first with rescue, then with ARPA, which I have learned pretty directly that the ARPA guidelines and rules are different than the rescue dollars were. So do you feel as though one question is, I noticed that you have people from Moss Adams, did I get the company right? Okay, great. that they had someone focused on federal. the federal investments. Is that true every year, or was that a special focus this year?
No, it's required. The single audit, that's the name we use, is the annual audit of all federal expenditures. And that's done annually. That's been a requirement for many years. This year, of course, the dollars have been much larger. And because auditors can only test, in great detail, a certain percentage, they pick what they call major programs. And so that's when Amanda indicated what the federal programs were. They didn't have to do as many because the federal rescue program was such a large dollar value, large dollar amount that was their primary focus. But it is an annual report, an annual audit and an annual report.
Well, maybe the comment is that having enough of staff support to manage that is not a concern, but something I just want to lift up because it appears that the ARPA dollars are more complex, in my opinion, on how we manage them. The good news is we can expend them over a period of time longer than the rescue dollars. However, there's more rules and regulations with them. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. I must say we have an amazing, incredible staff that it's very experienced in federal rules and regulations, led by Sheila Craig. We did also keep a modest administrative budget out of the ARPA funds to ensure that we could provide the administration of these monies quickly yet efficiently and via the controls, so that there wouldn't be any surprises or any bad news next year. So I feel we do have a good staff in place, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we got that into the public record since this is a unique moment in time in terms of those investments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
So moved.
Commissioner Ryan moves, Commissioner Hardesty, I'll put that in a second. Any further discussion? Keelan, please call the roll.
Epps.
I'd like to thank staff and invited guests for this very clear presentation today. I'm also glad to hear that the city has robust financial accountability systems in place. And I am delighted to hear that the city's financial fundamentals remain sound. For those reasons, I am glad to vote aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank CFO Kirby and the team at Moss Adams for their diligent work on this audit. I can only imagine the amount of work and detail that goes into these reviews. And I also really want to appreciate CFO Kirby and the city team's work to ensure that we maintain our excellent AAA rating and good standing. Thanks so much for all that you do. As expressed through the work of the audit, the pandemic also highlights for us the importance of having reliable and accurate financial analysis so that we can make important investments and sound decisions for our communities, and especially in these difficult times. So thanks again for the presentation, and I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you again, CFO Kirby and your amazing staff and the partners at Moss Adams for bringing this audit citywide finances into the public record. There's nothing like a clean audit. I've been involved with ones that have material weaknesses, and it's quite a process to clean those up. So that's a big deal. And maintaining the Moody's AAA rating, I always equate it with having a credit score personally of over 800. It's just much better for your interest rates. So anyway, it's really a pleasure to receive a report like this. It doesn't get enough attention. And there's a lot of labor and good work that goes into this. So thank you so much. And I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I will join the chorus line to really be grateful and appreciative for the hard work of the auditors, as well as your division, Director Kirby. I think most people who haven't served on nonprofit boards, a AAA rating is the very best that you can possibly do. And I have 40 plus years of an award of excellence in our audits really shows the dedication, the commitment, and the expertise of city staff to faithfully make sure that we're using the public dollars in a way that is transparent and accountable to good financial practices. I am very excited about continuing this effort. I continue to, and I guess the last thing I want to say is, it's a reminder that we do financial planning 5 years out. So sometimes when we make quick decisions, we are not taking into account the long-term financial implications for the city of Portland. Again, job well done. Happy to continue our AAA rating. I'm happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you to the Accounting Division as well as Moss Adams for your outstanding work in the preparation and audit of this report. We have good news to celebrate, as was made clear both by the report and the questions. The fiscal year 2021 financial report received an unmodified opinion from our auditors. That's always very positive. Our credit rating, as noted previously, remains AAA during a period of unprecedented financial uncertainty. And key indicators reflect the city's financial strength in relation to other peer cities across the country. While we're weathering the current economic challenges as well, we have to continue to maintain stable fund balances and maintain our liquidity, while at the same time monitoring our performance and liabilities to ensure that we are remaining stable over the long term. So with that, I appreciate this report. I appreciate the great work that's been done by the entirety of the team, both internal to the city of Portland, as well as our external auditors. Thank you all. I vote aye, the report's accepted. Thank you. Next item, 871, please. This is a second reading.
Accept and appropriate grant in the amount of $9,351 and authorize intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation for the 2022 Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Plan for commercial motor vehicle inspections by Police Bureau sworn personnel.
Colleagues, this is the second reading. We've already heard a presentation and had opportunity for public testimony. Is there any further discussion on this item before we call the roll? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Apps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, please, 872. This is a non-emergency ordinance.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Stark Trunk Relief Structure Project number E11009 for an estimated cost of $2,400,000.
Commissioner Maps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, the item before us today comes to us from Environmental Services, which provides sewage and stormwater collection services to meet the city's current and future needs. That work also protects public health, water quality, and the environment. The project before us today will alleviate flooding in inner Southeast Portland and will protect the community by providing the infrastructure necessary to safely convey combined sewer releases through underground infrastructure. Now, this project will not increase the frequency or volume of combined sewer overflows that go into the river. Instead, this project will reduce flooding in our streets and buildings. This ordinance accomplishes that by authorizing a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder. Today, we have two staff members from Environmental Services who will tell us more about this project. So I'd like to welcome Amy Dunning, Project Manager with Environmental Services, and Matt Goff, Public Involvement Coordinator, also with Environmental Services. Amy, Matt, welcome. Please tell us more.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning to everyone. I believe the clerk is going to share our presentation and we'll get started. Great. So thank you for your time this morning. We come to you today to request authorization to advertise the Stark Trunk Release Structure Project. My name is Amy Dunning, and as the commissioner mentioned, I'm presenting here with Matt Goff from Public Involvement. Next slide. So you may recall that I presented a project overview as part of a temporary construction easement ordinance a few weeks ago. To recap, this project is located at Southeast Stark and Southeast 3rd Avenue. During storms in 2015, combined sewer overflows were released to the street. This project will construct the infrastructure necessary to safely convey these flows and avoid surface flooding. The improvements include an underground structure and a large pipe culvert. Flows will be redirected from the Stark Trunk sewer main to the existing Outfall 37 sewer main and ultimately the Willamette River. Next slide. Matt, you want to take this one?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Again, my name is Matt Goff. I do public outreach for BES Capital Improvement Projects. Outreach for this project began in May 2020 and focused on introducing the project, providing a public contact, and preparing the neighborhood for design activities such as collecting survey and soil sample information. As a result of outreach so far, some people have requested schedule updates, but have not expressed concerns about the project. In addition, we conducted focus outreach to nearby businesses. In particular, the project team consulted with Mesher Supply Company, who are located on Southeast 3rd Avenue between Stark and Washington. Through emails, phone calls, and on-site meetings, we worked out the logistics needed to complete the project while minimizing impact to their normal operations. Future outreach leading up to construction and during construction will focus on maintaining close communication with Mesher Supply and other nearby businesses and preparing the neighborhood and the traveling public for construction in the area. As we receive questions and concerns, we intend to work as a team to address them.
Next slide, please. The estimated construction cost for this project is $2.4 million. The estimate has a high level of confidence and is based on final construction drawings. The project is scheduled to advertise in January of 2022 and begin construction in May of 2022. It is important to align our construction with the dry season, and it's estimated to last approximately 5 months. Next slide. And that's the end of our presentation, and we can open it up to any questions.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
All right, very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next item, please, 873.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the citywide sump replacement project number E11155 for an estimated cost of $1,458,600.
This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Commissioner Mapps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, the ordinance before us today would authorize environmental services to rehabilitate and install 28 stormwater infiltration sumps, which will manage stormwater and reduce flooding at 14 sites across the city. This project will repair aging sumps to prevent failures, The project will also help control stormwater runoff during heavy rains, and it will improve water quality in our rivers and creeks. Finally, this project will help prevent flooding of our streets and buildings. This ordinance would authorize environmental services to solicit bids to construct 28 sumps. This $1.4 million project is scheduled to begin in June and be completed within a year. Today, we have 3 staff members from Environmental Services who will tell us more about this project. So with that, let me welcome Brandon Wilson, Engineering Supervisor, Riley Walsh, Project Manager, and Stefanos Gunawan, Community Outreach Representative. Welcome, everybody. Please tell us more about this project.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, my name is Brandon Wilson, BES Engineering Supervisor. Commissioner did a great job summarizing what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to turn it over to Riley at this point. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Mapps and City Council, for your time. I believe the clerk will be putting up the presentation here. Great. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Riley Walsh. I'm the Design Project Manager for the citywide sump rehabilitation and replacement project. I'm presenting today to receive authorization to solicit a competitive bid and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for this project. Next slide, please. Brief project overview. The citywide sump rehabilitation and replacement project will install 28 sumps at 14 different project locations in North, Northeast, and Southeast Portland. Sump is a precast concrete structure that is below the surface that allows stormwater to infiltrate into the ground. If you look at the right side of the slide here, there's a diagram that shows how stormwater is collected by our storm drains, filtered in our sedimentation manholes, and then goes into our sump or UIC, and then goes through the drain rock and drains into the ground. On the bottom left side of the screen, you can see a map showing the existing 9,000 sumps that are within the city, serving primarily North, Northeast, and Southeast Portland due to soil conditions. It looks like a bunch of trees, but each one of those green dots is a sump. This project is the first project for BES to systematically replace and rehabilitate existing failing sumps. The sumps selected for replacement were chosen because they were adopted by the city from the county. And when the county installed them, they were installed substandard. And some of them are failing and causing surface flooding, both in the right of way and on private property. In addition to replacing the sumps, we'll also install 700 feet of inlet leads, 20 inlets, and 6 ADA ramps. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the construction methods that we'll be using to replace a sump. On the right, you have 2 construction workers forming ADA ramps. On the left is the similar inlet to what we'll be building on this project. All of this work will be completed via open cut excavation. Next slide. I'll now turn it over to Stefanos to speak on public outreach and impacts.
Thank you, Riley. For the record, my name is Stefanos Gunawan, and I'm the public community outreach coordinator for BES and capital improvement projects. Public outreach, and excuse me, I have a sick kid in the background if you do hear some cooing. The public outreach began probably in 2019, and it's kind of evolved, particularly with COVID, but also because there's more than about 15 neighborhoods and business districts that are part of this project. So the best method that we came up with is using social media, project updates, email updates, flyers, next door, and some face-to-face. The one thing that I wanted to highlight is about the diverse communities that I've encountered doing research and seeing that Spanish was a highly needed language for the Park Rose Heights area, followed by Vietnamese and Chinese communities needing translations. The diagram that Riley showed really kind of displays, the project itself using the diagram with like how the sump will affect the neighborhoods and the neighborhood streets. And we're keeping mindful of inclusive outreach and providing translations if needed around these projects. I myself speak Spanish, and so it's that can be helpful around translating or assisting others that need that.
Great, thank you, Stefanos. One other note is we have 3 potential night work locations on this project, and a noise variance has been received for all of those locations and have been approved. Next slide, please. So engineer's estimate and schedule, as Commissioner stated, our estimate is about $1.4 million with a high confidence level. We anticipate to advertise the project in April 2022, begin construction in July 2022, and a current construction duration of 240 days, but could go up to a year as the Commissioner stated. That's all I have for you today, so we can go to the next slide, and I'm open for any questions.
We have one question, Commissioner Maps.
Hi. Can we go back to the slide that shows the map of the locations of our sumps?
It was there for a second.
Oh, there we go. I should know the answer to this, but actually I don't. Looking at the map on the left, I'm struck by the relative lack of density of sumps in inner southeast and inner northeast. Is there an easy explanation for that?
A lot of these sumps are outside the CSO system, and a lot of them were adopted from the county, which didn't tie into the storm system that far out. So there's not a storm system in farther east Portland. So.
All right, great. Thank you. Interesting.
Very good. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. Commissioner Maps now made me ask this question. So there are no sumps in East Portland. So what happens to stormwater runoff in East Portland?
So the map of all the green dots were existing sumps. So that's what's there instead of existing storm sewers that then go towards the river. The sumps take the water and keep it in southeast, and it manages all of that flow.
And so how does that work in communities that are sumpless?
Some have, stormwater facilities. Some of that storm drains into the big pipe and then is sent up to the treatment plant. So sumps are great for reducing the wastewater that we have to treat at the Columbia wastewater treatment plant.
It's interesting because the project that you're going to be doing on, I think on Washington and 3rd is a good example of how stormwater captures. We have areas of that in East Portland, and I was just wondering if we should be asking for sumps or there is another alternative actually for that water to be collected and cleaned and utilized. Thank you.
Very good. And Keelan, you said there was no public testimony?
That's correct.
All right, this is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Item 874, please.
Authorize the Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain permanent and temporary rights necessary for construction of the Northeast Halsey Bike Ped Transit improvement project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
This is an emergency ordinance. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. The ordinance in front of you is also referred to as the Northeast Halsey Bike Pedestrian Transit Improvement Project, and it will install bike, pedestrian, and transit-related improvements on Northeast Halsey between Northeast 68th Avenue and Northeast 92nd Avenue. These improvements also include installing America with Disability Act wheelchair accessible ramps, signalized pedestrian crosswalks, painted separate bike lanes, and new sidewalks. For more information and to answer your questions, I have from the Portland Bureau of Transportation, Nicole Pierce and Kevin Balka. Did I say that right, Kevin?
Balak. That's right.
All right, thank you. Here to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, I think the clerk was going to share the presentation. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Nicole Pierce. I'm a Capital Project Manager at PBOT, and I'm here in support of our right-of-way division to give you a brief overview of the Northeast Halsey Bike Ped Transit Improvement Project. As Commissioner Hardesty mentioned, the limits of the project are on Northeast Halsey from 68th to 92nd. And I did present on this project way back in 2019. And at that time, you passed an ordinance accepting a $2.4 million grant from ODOT for some of the funding for this total $5.1 million project. Next slide. And so here's just the wording of the ordinance in front of you today. Authorize the Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain permanent and temporary rights necessary for the construction of the Northeast Halsey Bike Ped Transit Improvement Project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority. Next slide. This project is the result of two planning efforts, the 2009 East Side Max Station Area Communities Report and the 2016 Growing Transit Communities Plan. Both of those planning efforts included extensive public involvement in the form of surveys, open houses, and advisory committees. This project is located in an area that scores high on the PBOT equity matrix, meaning there are higher than average populations of low income, limited English proficiency, and non-white populations. The project has a lot of community support, but I specifically want to mention two organizations. The first is Join, which is a homeless support nonprofit, and they're located on Northeast 81st, south of Halsey. And the second is the Multnomah County Juvenile Justice Complex, located on Northeast 68th Avenue, south of Halsey. So looking at this map, the Juvenile Justice Complex is south of that westernmost red triangle, and Join is just south of the orange triangle, and which is at 80th. So also, TriMet has identified Northeast Halsey for more frequent future transit service here on line 77. Northeast Halsey is a designated high crash network street for 2 of the 3 modes, walking and driving. And this project will also connect pedestrians and cyclists to a new multi-use path that will be built to the east as part of another project, which will connect Northeast Halsey Street over I-205 to the Gateway Transit Center. Next slide. So this project is really centered on making it easier and safer for people to walk, bike, and roll to and from the 82nd Avenue Max Station. So now I'm going to quickly go through some of the highlights of the scope of the project. Next slide. So starting from the west, we are constructing a new crossing at Northeast Halsey and 68th Avenue. As you can see, currently there's no crossing. And if you know that area, 68th Avenue functions kind of, Commissioner Hardesty mentioned ADA ramps, all of these places where I'm showing crossings, we will also be upgrading or installing new ADA ramps. So next slide. We'll also be adding a mini roundabout at Northeast Halsey and 80th Avenue. Next slide. So in conjunction with the roundabout, we'll be putting in 2 new crosswalks with median islands and doing some sidewalk infill along the east side of 81st Avenue. Next slide. So then from 80th Avenue over I-84 on the bridge structure, we're going to be striping 2-way buffered bike lanes on the south side of the structure, where currently there are no bike facilities. Next slide. And here's a cross section showing how those bike lanes will look on the structure. Next slide. And that buffered bike lane will continue out along Halsey to 92nd Avenue, will remain on the south side of the road. As you can see, there are currently no sidewalks at all on Halsey from 85th to 92nd. And this project will be adding a sidewalk on the north side of the street. Next slide. So the cross section below shows the new sidewalk. We won't be reducing vehicle capacity in Halsey. We're going to keep the same number of travel lanes. However, we will be removing parking on the south side of Halsey. So the schedule for the project, the team recently completed 60% design. The right-of-way phase is just getting started, and this ordinance is one piece of that. And then we're hoping to get started on construction early in 2023. And then just a brief overview of the public involvement we've done so far. We weren't able to do an in-person open house, but we did a virtual open house and an online survey. And in advance of the survey and open house, we mailed postcards to almost 9,000 households in the project area. The open house and survey were available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We received over 400 responses, with the majority expressing enthusiastic support for the project. I've also given presentations at the Madison South and Montavilla Neighborhood Association meetings, and we'll be setting up another round of meetings with them in the next few months. We've also sent letters to property owners in order, in part, to give them a heads up about this upcoming right-of-way process. And I have personally spoken to several residents and business owners along the project corridor. Next slide. And now I'll hand the presentation off to my colleague, Kevin Ballack.
Thanks, Nicole. Good morning, commissioners and mayor. My name is Kevin Ballack. I am currently a right-of-way agent for the PBOT. Right-of-way for this project, the agenda item 874 gives PBOT the authority to compensate affected property owners for needed permanent and temporary easements, and if necessary, to condemn for these property rights associated with the Northeast Halsey Bike Ped Transit Improvement Project. Permanent and temporary right-of-way is needed from 28 individual properties. Permanent rights are needed from 7 properties for completion of roadway, ADA ramp, and signal facilities. Temporary rights are needed from all 28 properties for construction support activities. All affected owners have been informed of the need for specific easements. With that, we can take any questions from you.
Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, do we have any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to really appreciate Kevin as the public right-of-ways person in charge. I just want you to know you and your staff just did a brilliant job during COVID, helping keep businesses operating. And I just want you to know publicly how grateful I am to your philosophy of like, how do we make it work as compared to how do I make sure that the city actually charges sufficiently for the staff time that was there, right? It's the first time you've been in front of me since the remarkable program, but I did not want today to go by without letting you know how I see you and how much I appreciate the great work you do.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate it, and I know our right-of-way staff is working very hard. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That concludes our testimony, Mayor.
Very good.
It's an emergency ordinance.
Excellent. Thank you. Keelan, please call the roll.
Apps.
I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty and PBOT for bringing this project forward. I look forward to these improvements to our city's infrastructure, and for those reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty and PBOT for bringing this this item forward. I know this area very well. I lived in this area for many, many years, and these safety improvements are greatly needed, and the community has been talking about them for years. So I'm very, very excited to see this begin. So thanks again for the great presentation and looking forward to it. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, joining the chorus here. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for your leadership along with the right-of-way staff at PBOT. Like Commissioner Rubio, I know the area really well. I've experienced the need for pedestrian safety there. And it was just so fascinating to observe the slides and remember moments where you're just so thrilled that this change is coming. And I always really appreciate lifting up the need for the wheelchair accessibility ramps. It's just something that we've been really slow to implement. And anyway, this is a wonderful step in the right direction. I'm really happy to vote yes on this emergency ordinance. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Again, thank you, Peabody. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Nicole, for the excellent presentation. And thank you, the right-of-way staff. I agree. This is my hood. I'm excited about these improvements. We've needed them for a long time. I'm very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everybody, Commissioner Hardesty and staff for working on it. We'll go back to the consent agenda. The first pulled item 8.6.2, please.
Create a new non-represented classification of Director of Police Education and Training, which is exempt from classified service, and establish a compensation range.
Colleagues, this ordinance creates a classification and a compensation range for the Director of Police Education and Training, otherwise known as the Dean of Training. The Portland Police Bureau has been interested in forming this position for quite some time, and the position is also part of the Department of Justice settlement agreement. The creation of this position was approved by the council during the 2021 fall bump process. City Attorney Robert Taylor, Chief Deputy City Attorney Heidi Brown, and Classification and Compensation Analyst Barb Seipels are here to answer any questions about the ordinance. I'm not sure who pulled this one.
Mayor, I asked to have it pulled because this is such a important piece. I did not want it to not have an opportunity for the public to understand the significant shift that we're about to take. So I appreciate all of you supporting just having a brief conversation about it. I actually do have a question about the ordinance itself, but I was hoping that either Heidi or Robert would, in plain speak, give us an opportunity to know what are we doing with this position and why is this important? This position so key to us moving forward in our police transformation.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, my name is Robert Taylor. I'm the city attorney. And as you mentioned, Commissioner, this position is an important step in improving policing in Portland. It is something that the Bureau has been interested in, and it's also something that the Department of Justice has asked as one of the remedies, and that the city has agreed to as one of the remedies. And the concept behind this position is other cities do this also, but the idea is that this will be a civilian person with expertise in adult education, and they will be responsible for directing all of the educational and training aspects of the police bureau. And a person with that type of expertise really can help officers understand the training in a way that we think will be more effective. And that's the purpose behind it.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was clear. That was concise. I am very appreciative. I have one question for Barb. Bob, there's a $50 an hour, a $40 an hour difference between the low end of this pay scale and the top end of this pay scale. It seems like it's an enormous range. Why do we have such a large range in salary for this particular position?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I'm Barb Seipels, BHR, Bureau of Human Resources Classification and Compensation Analyst, for the record. And to answer your question, the way that the classification and compensation team determines pay ranges is based on a combination of market research as well as aligning what we discover in the market with our existing pay structure. In order to provide a pay range for this new classification, we went first to the market to find comparable positions with comparable requirements in terms of education and experience, and made a tentative assessment of what would be appropriate pay. And then we matched that to existing pay grades for existing classifications that have a similar level of authority and responsibility and independence of in carrying out their program. And so we, after looking at market, we felt that the duties and the responsibility level aligned with our current classification of Manager 3. And so ultimately we decided to match this position or align this position with the existing Manager 3 pay grade at the city.
So maybe a better question for me to help me understand, because I'm still not understanding. I would think there'd be a different pool of candidates at $117,000 a year than it would be at $200,000 a year. So I'm still not understanding why there's almost a $40 difference between the low end of the pay scale and the high end of the pay scale. What are you measuring to get from 117 to 200,000 annually as a salary?
Frankly, it's really just an alignment with our current pay structure. It was using an existing pay structure, and I don't have an answer for you on how that structure was determined in the past.
I see Heidi has her hand up, Mayor.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. Heidi Brown, Chief Deputy City Attorney. Nice to see all of you today. So just briefly, the pay range was determined in the class comp study that occurred in 2019, and it was adopted at that time and based on a market analysis of, a number of areas, both wide ranged and close in. And so the range that's on there is one that already exists and has existed since that, since we changed our classifications, both the specifications and the compensation structure back at the end of 2019. Does that help, Commissioner?
I don't think it does. I guess my concern, and Mayor, this is my concern for the council. I mean, I think if we put out a job application with a range from 117 to 200,000, that is such a significant range of experience and that it appears to me that it would be really difficult to figure out what the appropriate salary would be. I mean, we're hiring a professional trainer. We're hiring someone with some expertise that we don't have inside. I'm just very concerned about the appearance of just not knowing what it is we're hiring when you have a range that's that significant. It just doesn't appear that we have narrowed down what the skill sets are we're looking for. And I would question whether or not we've classified it appropriately.
With that knowledge in mind, I'd like to propose an amendment that we withdraw the emergency clause from this. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Please call any further discussion on this. Call the roll, please.
Abs.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. So what I would encourage, since I'm just going to move this to second reading, Commissioner Hardesty, if you could spend some time with Robert and the HR folks and see if you can hammer out, get answers to your questions and potentially hammer out some of your concerns.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's my biggest concern. And I'm a big fan of this. I'm 100% in support. I don't want to make sure we hire the right people and we understand what it is we're recruiting for. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Any further discussion on this item? Is there any public testimony, Keelan?
No one signed up.
This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance and moves to second reading. Item 863 also pulled from consent.
Pay settlement of Laurie Offenbach property damage claim for the sum of $6,275 involving Portland Parks and Recreation.
Colleagues, this ordinance resolves a property damage claim resulting from an incident in February of 2021. Liability claims manager Jessica Bird's here to present the ordinance. Who pulled this item, Keelan?
Catherine Thompson, a member of the public, and they are on the call.
Very good. Should we hear Catherine's testimony first, and then that'll help focus staff response? Let's do that. Go ahead and let Catherine speak. 3 minutes, please, name for the record.
Okay. Catherine, are you there? Catherine, it looks like you're still muted.
Okay. Did that take care of it?
Yeah, now we hear you.
Okay. Let's see. I think it's still good morning. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I'm Catherine Thompson, and I'm here to comment on this item and to raise a concern. I have a question in response to the settlement in which property damage occurred due to falling branches with potential liability on the part of the Parks Department. My question for you as the highest political authority in the city is how can you act to prevent these sorts of these damages when a hazard has been identified? And I think is very pertinent in terms of the testimony earlier today from citizens who are being held responsible for their trees that are dangerous. As a pediatrician, I recognize that prevention is the most effective and economical strategy. And with a group of volunteers, I have poured over the 2019 Morgan Holland inventory of the trees in the South Park blocks. And we discovered that this inventory has identified a subset of otherwise healthy, viable trees that are hazardous due to heavy lopsided canopy over a street, large dead branches high in the canopy, and trees with evidence of potential structural instability. 2 trees described in this way fell in February 2021 in an ice storm and caused considerable property damage. Fortunately, no one was injured. I want to thank Commissioner Rubio and her staff for their responsiveness in discussing these issues. Last June, in conversation with Cynthia Castro and urban forester Joel Smith, we learned that none of the maintenance recommendations identified in the 2019 Holland report, none of these hazardous trees have been addressed. None. We've written letters to the Parks Department, the urban forester asking for urgent remediation without success. We've had a wonderful discussion with Commissioner Rubio's new parks liaison, Mona Schwartz, over a month ago, and she seems to get it, but it just doesn't seem like there's any leverage to get something done this year. We are entering into an ice storm season, and there are trees out there that are dangerous. I would suggest that you contact Morgan Holland and Associates who have a better capacity to prioritize the entire list of hazardous trees. I've submitted some documents today that show the trees we've tried to figure out seem to be the highest priority. So I think Morgan Holland or another private crew may be available to do the necessary work at this point. It is clear that urban forestry is not available to respond in a timely fashion. So in conclusion, I'm here to ask you to use your authority to handle known hazardous trees in a preventative and economical way. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thanks for highlighting this. And it sounds like you're working with the commissioner in charge on some potential solutions. And I appreciate you being here today to offer up some innovative approaches. So I assume that conversation will continue. So thank you. Any further public testimony on this item, Keelan?
No, that was it.
Colleagues, any further questions? All right, then with that, Jessica, I think you're off the hook here. I'll just call the roll, please.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank Catherine for her conversations with us and for sharing her concerns and information. And I also want to extend my apologies to Ms. Offenbach that these events even happened and that the challenges occurred with this property. Urban forestry has been for quite some time been operating under challenging funding circumstances over many, many years. And for this, I want to appreciate that their dedication and hard work despite these understaffing challenges. However, with the passage of the Parks Local Option Levy, Parks will be able to protect Portland's 1.2 million park trees by performing proactive maintenance, safety checks, hazard removal, and replacement of damaged trees in parks and natural areas. And a portion of the parks levy funding was allocated to Urban Forestry Division during the City Council's fall bump monitoring process in November. And this includes Urban Forestry adding new positions for the first time to start proactively caring for and maintaining Portland Parks and Recreation trees, as well as being more responsive to tree emergencies, as you've noted, and increase the urban tree canopy and improve services and outcomes for all of our regulatory functions. So I understand there are many areas of the city where the community members feel really concerned about these trees, including in the South Park blocks and many other locations. And I look forward, and my team will continue to work with urban forestry and community to ensure that we have equitable tree service across all parts of the city. So with that, I vote aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for that explanation. I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome of that work. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Yeah, I also want to applaud Commissioner Rubio's proposed action here. I think that makes a lot of sense and is responsive to the concerns expressed by Laurie. So thank you for that. I'm happy to vote aye. The ordinance is approved. Last item pulled off the consent agenda, item 866, please.
Accept a grant in the amount of $400,000 from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance, and appropriate $220,797 for the FY 2021 Intellectual Property Enforcement Program competitive grant to address intellectual property criminal enforcement.
Colleagues, intellectual property crimes don't only affect the bottom line of big businesses. Counterfeit goods pose a significant threat to the health and safety of our entire community, a threat that's proven to be especially salient throughout this particular last couple of years during the pandemic. The Intellectual Property Crimes Enforcement Task Force, originally founded in 2015 and funded by previous Intellectual Property Enforcement Program grants, otherwise known as IPEP, has seen an increase in counterfeit COVID-19 medical supplies, as well as treatments in the greater Portland metropolitan area. Since March of 2020, the task force has investigated and seized the shipments of counterfeit KN95 masks, as well as COVID-19 rapid tests. Without the interference of the task force, these illegal goods would have ended up in homes and hospitals in our community, adding further safety concerns to an already dangerous situation. These interceptions were made possible by the funding from the IPEP grant and the police bureau that the police bureau received in 2018. By accepting the $400,000 awarded in the 2021 IPEP grant, the task force will continue to build on its prior successes in keeping harmful counterfeit items from landing in the hands of unsuspecting victims and keeping our community safer. The 2021 award will be used specifically to fund task force overtime for the investigation of intellectual property crimes, the development and implementation of public education and outreach through a dedicated website, and the development of a training program for all law enforcement agencies to teach investigative techniques on IP crime. Detective Cheryl Waddell is here to provide further context regarding the task force and the initiatives in the 2021 IPEP grant. But before we get to that, before we get to Cheryl, who was this pulled by council or was this pulled by a member of the community?
It was pulled by me, Mayor.
Oh, very good. Okay, great. So I'll let you ask your questions, then maybe Cheryl can be responsive to any questions or thoughts you have, Commissioner.
Yes, wonderful. This sounds like a great grant. And I just wanted to put on the record as I saw the diversity of law enforcement agencies, including Customs and Border Patrol and Homeland Security as part of this task force. I just wanted to put on the public record to make sure that we are not sharing information inappropriately with agencies that we should not be sharing information with. So can you tell me how our ban on working with ICE actually would be impacted by this grant?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing this up, Counselor. We don't share.
Cheryl, could I get you to sorry, I know I introduced you, but you have to state your name for the record. I apologize.
I'm sorry. For the record, my name is Cheryl Waddell. I'm a detective with the Portland Police Bureau, and I'm the grant manager for the Oregon Intellectual Property Enforcement Task Force. Information is not shared with, I think that you may be alluding to the Homeland Security, ICE. We do not work with ICE at all. We only work with HSI investigations, which they investigate fraud, bank and wire fraud, and those type of investigations. And as for working with Customs and Border Patrol, I apologize, it should actually say Customs and Border Protection, as we work with the border officers that are actually customs officers at the ports. So as packages come in internationally through the ports, either by ship or plane, they're inspected at the CBP, and actually in Portland, we are a port of entry. And so they inspect these suspicious packages. And I have a PowerPoint if anybody wants the time to watch it, but if not, I understand.
No, you can send it to me if you'd like, but
sure.
I just wanted to make sure, because of course, Portlanders are always concerned when we're engaged with federal agencies, especially with our experience over the last couple of years with federal agencies. So just wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to put this on the public record.
Sure. Absolutely, ma'am. We have never, and I have been involved in this grant since the beginning in 2011. I have written every single grant, and I have been the administrator every single time. I can assure you we have never worked in that capacity or shared that kind of information, and we don't ask it, and it's not part of any of our investigations.
Well, thank you. You have put my mind at ease, and I'm sure many members of the public as well. And so I have one last question. And I read in the Oregonian that you're also searching the black net. Is there such a thing as the black net? And if so, what is the police role in policing the black net?
I think I've never heard it called the black net. I think they're referring to the dark net.
Yeah. Maybe I changed it to the black net because, I do stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
The dark net. Yeah, you're right. That's what I read.
Okay. Well, the dark net is a location within the internet. So the public internet that we all see every day through Google is just the tip of the iceberg. All the other part of the net, although they call it the dark net, you need a special browser, which is a Tor browser, Tor, and that's where they get the thing Onion. These are publicly available that you can download this Tor to now look around on sites that are on the dark net. So traditionally, people that don't want to be seen except under certain circumstances will use that net. We are exploring and using the dark net to complement our investigations on where subjects are exchanging counterfeit goods. So they put them for sale on counterfeit goods, or they're selling credit card names and PII. So my investigation, I work for the white collar crime, or it's property crimes, previously white collar crime. And our investigations encompass all of those types of property crimes. So that's the only way we're really using it. I'm not just surfing on the dark web and going, and let's see if I can buy this. And it's going toward an investigation that we've already started.
Thank you, Detective.
It's been a pleasure. You've answered my questions very transparently, and it appears that you actually enjoy your job very much. Thank you so much for being here today to answer my questions. I'm very appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you, Detective Waddell. Great work. Any further questions?
No more.
Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
I want to first thank Deputy Chief Rome for taking the time this week to talk to my staff about this item, and also Detective Waddell for the thorough explanation today. As soon as we learned the agencies the Bureau coordinates with for these operations, it became clear to us too that we wanted to do more digging. So I appreciate all the help and information that was given to us to help us understand. Our office too, like Commissioner Hardesty, wants to make sure that the city stays in compliance with Oregon's Sanctuary Promise Act. And for background, our immigrant communities have been significantly impacted by joint operations like these in the past with federal agencies, especially when they focus on immigration enforcement. And after looking into this, I understand that this type of grant operation will not require, nor will it focus in any way on immigration enforcement. And I can understand and appreciate the need for these operations. And I also understand that the funds can only be used exclusively for intellectual property enforcement, correct? That's correct too. So to that extent, my staff will remain in communication with Bureau leadership throughout the duration of the grant so that we can be assured that we do not run afoul of the Oregon Sanctuary Act. So for all these reasons, I vote aye.
Ryan.
Thank you for the presentation and thank you for the additional insight, Commissioner Rubio. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I also want to thank you again, Detective Waddell, for being here today. It's important that the public understands when we do these kind of grants. And we also are not part of the Joint Tourism Task Force. So when we see Homeland Security and all these federal agents sharing information, it sends off alarm bells. You've done a great job of answering my questions, and I'm confident this grant will do what it is intended to do, which is to deal with intellectual property crimes. So I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Happy to vote aye. Thank you, Detective. Thanks for everybody who worked hard on this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Colleagues, we are adjourned. Thank you all.